Hey there, folks. So today I thought we'd do a little bit of reading. So the backstory here is I got from my mother, I guess it was 2 Christmases ago, actually, this subscription to I don't know of a great way to describe it. It's a company called Letterjoy, and they send you like a letter. I think it was supposed to be a letter every month, but I think they sent me a lot more than that, maybe close to 2 per month. And the idea is you kind of choose, I don't know, like an area or a genre that you want the letters to be about. And what my mom got for me was letters from like writers writing to each other. And these are like old, these are like classics era. I feel like these are like 1930s, 50s, from what I remember vaguely. Now I kind of suck at reading things like with my eyes on paper these days. So I've read like 1 or maybe 2 of these letters in the entire, it's like a year and a half. A year I was getting them, and then now I guess a half that I just keep sitting on this stack of letters. So I thought maybe we can read them together, and then I will actually read them. So I guess without further ado, let's get into actually reading the letter here. So the idea is they have the letter here, and then they have like some context about kind of who are these people, I guess. Like I said, I only read 1 or 2 of these probably like a year ago, and then I failed to do that anymore. You can see these are also, they're in like a cursive, and I am just a little bit dyslexic, but that makes it that much harder for me to sit down and read these things. But yeah, forgive me if I have to try a few times on some of these cursive words. But let's dive in here. Del Monte Ranch, Kesta, New Mexico, 31st of August, 1925. And now immediately I'm realizing I don't know how to pronounce this, so I am horrible at pronouncing English, despite that being my native and only language. I don't know, the Texan in me just takes over, and that's how I pronounce things. So forgive me for that. And let's continue here. Dear Crichton, I read your story at once, and will say my say at once. I can't typewrite. You are too journalistic, too much concerned with facts. You don't concern yourself with the human side at all, only with the insides of steelworks. It's the sort of consciousness the working man has, but at the same time, he's got a passionate subconscious, and it's this subconscious which makes the story, otherwise you have journalism. Now you want to be an artist, so you've got to use the artist's faculty of making the subconscious conscious. Take you and Andy, a boy as blank as most American boys. Oh, excuse me. Take your Andy, a boy as blank as most American boys, who, to my mind, are far blanker than English or Scotch boys. That's the atmosphere of understanding materialism that does it. But take your Andy and look under his blankness, under his cheerio and all that. Look for his hidden wistfulness, his absolutely shut-off passion, his queer, uncanny American isolation and stoicism. The fantasy of himself to himself, and give the same story in terms of these, not of his mechanical upper self. Your story don't know what that means. Your story, capital I. Your story is good record and excellent for conveying fact, but where the living feeling should be, it's like blank as the ordinary American is. Only the feeling is there, else the boy wouldn't possibly cry at the sight of a coal mine again. You've got the germ of a good novel story, though pretty hard to work out. I might take a small novel to do it. It might take a small novel to do it. What was there in the mines that held the boy's feelings? The darkness, the mystery, the otherworldness, the peculiar camaraderie, the sort of naked intimacy, men as gods in the underworld or as elementals. Create that in a picture. Then, with just a bit of alteration, mimify that middle part, the best, of your story's steel. Give the mystery, the cruelty, the deathliness of steel, as against the comparative softness, silkiness, naturalness of coal. Throw in that Alice is a symbol of the human ego striving in its vanity, superficial, but the man's soul really magnetized by steel, by coal, as two opposing master elements. Carbon versus iron, C and F. I'm not sure what that means, C and F. When we get inside ourselves and away from the vanity of the ego, Alice and smart clothes, then things are symbols. Coal is a symbol of something in the soul, old and dark and silky and natural, and matrix of fire and steel is symbol of something else in the soul, hard and death-dealing, cutting, hurting, annihilating the living tissue forever. You've got to allow yourself to be, in some measure, the mystic that your real self is, under all the American efficiency and smartness of the ego, before you can be an artist. Well, you'll be bored by this. I wonder if you'd care for Paris should say not. I wonder if you'd care for Paris should say not. I think I'm reading that right, but that doesn't parse as a sentence to me. I wonder if you'd care for Paris should say not. Either try Italy and the sun or a Devonshire village. It's your missionary soul you need thawing out. I can perhaps help you if you do go to Europe. All good wishes from us all to Miss Crichton and you. D.H. Lawrence. And we have on the back here, postscript. In 1925, 28-year-old Kyle Crichton learned that author D.H. Lawrence was living on a ranch only 100 or so miles from his Albuquerque home. Soon after, Crichton and his wife piled into their beat-up Model T to drive to Lawrence's ranch, hoping to interview him. Crichton had never met Lawrence, nor did he have the faintest idea how to begin an interview. A former coal miner and steel worker, Crichton had only recently tried to kickstart a writing career. Yet, to his surprise, Lawrence, a fellow son of a miner, was happy to talk to him. Lawrence's only condition was that Crichton withhold publishing the interview until he was safely back across the Atlantic. After holding court on other popular authors of the day, Lawrence talked to Crichton about the young writer's own literary ambitions. Crichton was then writing a novel based on his days in the mines and mills, and Lawrence offered to read over it and offer feedback. This week's letter contains Lawrence's frank analysis of Crichton's manuscript. Complimentary of his skill as a reporter, Lawrence targets his critiques at the emotional depth, or lack thereof, of his characters. Lawrence then offers some suggestions for how Crichton could alter his story to vivify it and imbue it with symbolism. With the tact of a former school teacher, Lawrence then offers some encouragement, telling Crichton that he had the germ of a good novel story, though pretty hard to work out. Lawrence knew better than anybody the challenge of working out a story. He could write rapidly, finishing manuscripts in days, but it took him years to finalize manuscripts. Lawrence never outlined or planned his stories. He preferred to elucidate them by writing. Because of this, he sometimes had no concept of what a manuscript was about until near the end, and when he finished, he almost always wanted to start afresh. I can sympathize with that. Always searching for that perfect emotional pitch, Lawrence would rewrite his manuscripts up to and past when editors were proofreading them for publication. Lawrence also knew how well travel and companionship with other writers could enliven a writer's work. In a self-imposed exile from his home country, Lawrence spent most of his career bouncing between European cities and rural retreats in North and South America. He closes his letter by urging Crichton to relocate to a city, ideally in Europe, to thaw out his visionary soul. In future letters, he warns Crichton that the thawing out process would be slow, and counsels him about a trap he noticed many American writers fall into, trying to forge a dual path in fiction writing and the more practical, sensible career of journalism. Inevitably, the former got in the way of the latter. In 1929, Crichton relocated to New York and took a job as an editor at Scribner's. Boosted by his Lawrence interview, he soon built a reputation as an interviewer to the stars. Around the same time, Crichton also began moonlighting under a pseudonym as a writer for Communist Party newspapers. As Lawrence predicted, these pursuits distracted Crichton from his fiction, but not permanently. After the 1939 Soviet-Nazi pact, Crichton fell out of love with communism. With his evenings newly free, he resumed writing fiction. In 1944, he published his first novel. In 1950, he published a popular biography of the Marx Brothers, the comedians. He published a handful of additional books and plays. In a humorous twist for a former communist, his most successful was a Broadway musical named The Happiest Millionaire, which was later adapted into a feature film. writing advice given here. It actually applies to a book series I'm reading right now, which I think started out as a lot more character driven than it's ended up kind of in the late parts that I'm in now. I just finished, I think there's 2 or 3 more books after the one I just finished, which was number 7. Actually, I think there's only 2. I think it ends on 9. But the one criticism I've got of that book series, which is Temeraire, I think that's what the series is called, Temeraire by Naomi Novik, which is about, dragons in Napoleon War era England. Obviously, alternate historical fiction kind of vibe on that. But my criticism of the last couple of books would be, like, it really does just feel like a log of events that are happening, and it feels like we're getting really far away from the actual characters. We're not really hearing much about, like, the characters' thoughts and feelings, or, like, they're kind of mentioned, and then we just, like, move on. We don't dwell on them, or it just feels very much like here's the next thing that happened, here's the next thing that happened, here's the next thing that happened, and we're not delving into the actual characters as much as I would like, which is, kind of what's being said here in this letter. Alright, guess that's what I have to say about that. I do think it's funny that he's so anti-American. Take your Andy, a boy as blank as most American boys, who to my mind are far blanker than English or Scotch boys. It's the atmosphere of unending materialism that does it. Which I think is still true today. I guess this is, August 31, 1925. It's exactly 100 years ago. That's kind of funny. But that, I don't know if the English or Scotch boys are much better off these days. We all have this atmosphere of unending materialism these days. Far blanker, that's interesting. But then under that, we do acknowledge he has his hidden wistfulness, his shut-off passion, his queer, uncanny American isolation and stoicism, the fantasy of himself to himself. Now that's something that's very relevant to today, the fantasy of yourself to yourself. Your social media self, the persona you create. Very interesting. Alright. I've also been kind of thinking of, I don't know, should I start journaling? When I was little, I used to write a diary. And now I don't do anything. I just let the days slip past, and my memory is horrible. I don't remember anything. So I've been thinking maybe I should start writing. Maybe I should start journaling again. Try to remember my life as it goes past me. People used to like write to each other. Like I'm like texting my friends constantly, but I don't know. I feel like there would be something nice about actually writing letters. Maybe I ought to try that. Then they can just text me back if they want. I got a few friends who are splayed out across the country now. I don't see very often. Might be nice to have a concentrated catch-up every once in a while. But we'll see where I go with that. Alright. Thank you all for joining me today. Put this back in the envelope for storage. Careful not to flash my address here on the internet. Alright. I'll see y'all in the next one.